I want to be the best pianist in the world.
I would still love to be the best pianist in the world. Definitely.
I thought it was a very, very good performance, a good march feel, and if people wanted to know how to do dynamics convincingly, then they could just listen to Bartholomew playing it. Bartholomew, I've given you 86. So we've got Roberta, 85, tied with Joanna at 85, and third we've got Karen with 84.
21 years ago, Bartholomew Gee was born with arthrogryposis, a rare condition caused by the failure of muscles and joints to develop normally in the womb. The physical results can vary from mild to severe. Bartholomew's condition was classed as severe. At the time, doctors advised his parents, David and Lynn Gee, that Bartholomew would probably never be able to walk and at best have a very restricted lifestyle. They were wrong. Today, Bartholomew Gee lives a full life. This is his story, and also his parents, who, 21 years ago, welcomed him as their gift from God.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Bartholomew. Happy birthday to you.
First of all, I just loved him. I had great feeling for Bartholomew. He was my baby, and fortunately, I loved him before I knew how serious the whole thing was. To some extent, I felt it was my fault. This little baby and the problems that obviously he was going to face. You know, what have we actually done to produce this?
I think really within the first week, there was that feeling of devastation. And then I realised that life had to go on anyway, and this was going to be a big change. A child coming into the family is always a big change, but this was probably going to be a bigger change.
This is where my faith was a great help, because I felt that Bartholomew was our gift from God. I think it was something that the Lord did at that time, and I remembered those verses that say, you know, if I ask him for bread, will he give me a stone? If I ask for fish, will he give me a scorpion? It was something that I read when I was at school, in school assembly, and at that time it really stuck, you know, it struck me and it stayed with me. And I think on that day I thought, this little boy was our gift from God.
His feet were incurved so that the soles of his feet, instead of being in the right position, were curved right in, facing each other. He had relatively little movement at the knees. Fortunately, he has a certain amount of elbow movement, which has been helpful. His wrists were limited in terms of how much they moved. We had a problem because his left hip was out of place, and I operated to put the hip back in place, and in order to get the right alignment of the leg, did a second operation to actually rotate it. So he was in a very extensive plaster from his toes right up to his chest for quite a few weeks after that.
Bartholomew needed a tremendous amount of physio. He needed a lot of stimulation. Because he was bright, even as a baby, he needed to be stimulated and motivated. Obviously, it all had to be done for him.
He has been, really from birth, very determined. I would say it's almost implanted in him, because even when he was very small, his powers of concentration were quite phenomenal.
And that determination grew as young Bartholomew discovered his love of music.
What does piano mean?
Soft.
Soft. So you're going to start off soft, crescendo.
Getting louder.
Let's do that again, that passage, thinking more about your expression.
Roseanne Carpenter was Bartholomew's music teacher, and she soon discovered just how determined her young pupil was.
After a very few lessons, he said to me one day, "Mrs. Carpenter, please may I play what you're playing on the piano?" And I thought, well, what am I going to do? This little boy wants to do what I'm doing, and I'm sitting there playing with both hands, all my fingers, accompanying him, and he wants to do what I'm doing. So, why not? So we got Bartholomew onto the stool, and he understood how to read what I was doing. That was no problem. The reading came very, very easily. And his arms, we got the arms of the hands up onto the keyboard, and he did it. He was able to play, and he, with both hands, with all his might, making his fingers do what he wanted them to do.
Bartholomew enjoyed a certain amount of limelight, especially when he won a piano-playing competition. But he also had an older brother, Samuel, who tended to get overlooked.
One of the things that cropped up quite a lot, I'd go to the shops or I'd go out and everyone would say to me, "How's Bartholomew?" Great concern, "How's Bartholomew?" And tugging at my skirt would be Samuel. And I got to the stage where I really felt, oh, if only someone would stop and say to me, "How's Samuel?" Most mothers of children with problems, you know, they're delighted to have concern. But when they've got another little one, they feel quite concerned for the sibling who probably also would like to hear his name mentioned.
I don't think there's been any particular manifestation of jealousy or the fact that Bartholomew has had to have a lot of attention, and perhaps more than any other child would have. Samuel has been one of the most adaptable and easy boys to bring up. No adolescent tantrums or anything of that nature. So there's been no pressure from that side, and he's been very adaptable and very happy to tag along with whatever's going on, and we've just tried to do things as a normal family. Nothing particularly special to adapt for Bartholomew's needs. We've just tried to make it a normal life.
When I was 7, I wrote a poem. It's called My Brother. Brown hair, eyes of blue, brown face, my brother. Makes a mess, never tidies, not very strong, my brother. Likes playing with toys, always chatting, fun to be with, my brother. Likes a joke, always laughing, he's my best friend, my brother.
Bartholomew's physical condition wasn't a huge issue when I was young, because it was all I knew of him. And people would stare and people would ask questions and make comments sometimes, but it was never a real problem at all. There were times when I would get frustrated because he was a bit slower than I would want to be, but generally we managed to overcome that, and everything worked out well. I did feel protective towards him, especially at the times when we were in school together. Probably from about when I was about 13 and he was 10, we were both at the same school, and there were times when I'd hear of him being bullied, and there was the odd occasion that I saw it as well, and those times really did, make me want to get things sorted out for him.
When he was 20, Bartholomew spent a year at a Christian music college in Coventry, where he was able to develop his musical talents.
Okay, that's fine, that's fine. So there's a possibility there of, if you use that occasionally, then it's going to maybe develop a bit of strength. But what I also want to do, as if that wasn't enough, is to see how far you could actually use your thumb, because I know your thumb's quite weak as well, isn't it? So what I'm aiming for is to increase the spread. So if you've only got the 3 fingers playing, you're having to do a lot of work to get those 3 fingers in the right position. But what I'd like you to do is to just increase it by that length. So you're playing your 5th finger and your 1st finger. He has put a lot of work in, and that's not just work that a normal person would have to do just to do the pieces, because he's actually worked specifically improving his range and improving his ability. It'd be easy to look at Bart and just be nice and say, oh, well, poor dear, aren't you doing well, you know, and pat him on the head kind of thing, and I really didn't want to do that. And so we talked about this right at the very beginning, that even Bart is probably in some comfort zone. He's found a way to play, which is great, but I wanted to challenge that and say, well, try and do something different. Try and use your hands slightly differently. Try and use another finger that you never use. And I think if you asked him, I can remember the joy within really a couple of weeks when he was using another finger and then another finger, and more recently the stretches up to an octave and then beyond an octave. It was quite awesome.
The most interesting and probably amazing thing was when he went off to college, and he lived in a house with 3 other boys for a whole year. And he had a lady to go in the morning to help him get ready, but the rest of the day he looked after himself.
It was quite a big step for me to take, really, because I had to live away from home for my first time. When I was younger, I would never have even imagined of living away just because of the physical difficulties that I would encounter. But I managed it, really, and at times it was hard, but in myself it's made me stronger as a person.
That ability to cope was learned right from Bartholomew's early years, when he went to an ordinary school where he was treated just like any other normal boy.
We decided to send Bartholomew to a normal school, really because we felt that the facilities there would be quite adequate for his needs. So it's really more mobility being the problem, going up and down stairs and that sort of thing, that was really the problem for him, rather than other special needs. And we thought socially for him it would be better for him to be in a normal school amongst normal children, and really to be able to do all the things that boys of his age want to do, to go out and play football and do all the things that go on in school, and to have a completely normal life as much as possible.
One parent actually said that her little boy has really benefited by seeing how another little boy copes with his problems and with his difficulties. And I think that one of the main things is going to be that these children are actually growing up with a child with a difficulty who copes. And when they grow up and have other people around them who are handicapped, they're not going to cringe and be concerned, because it's something they're going to accept as normal.
You've got to be determined to do what Barty can do, because not everybody can do what he can do. Because he's determined, he can do what he can do now. It's because he doesn't let you do things, because he wants to try and get them right, and normally he does get them right in the end.
Yeah. He's just like us, really, except he's handicapped a little bit, because he can do things that we can do, and he can do things that we can't do.
He just needs a bit more tender loving care than everybody else, because he's got needs that other people don't need. He needs things more than other people.
Being judged best in his year at a local music Eisteddfod also helped others recognise Bartholomew as a talented person in his own right, winning not out of sympathy, but out of recognition of real ability. and that ability is still being recognised. It's awards day at the Music College in Coventry, and a proud day for Mum and Dad. Bristol's Royal Hospital for Sick Children became almost a second home for Bartholomew and his mum. Regular sessions of physiotherapy were essential for developing and strengthening muscles that had practically no power. Physiotherapist Jane Pyman found it quite a challenge.
Bartholomew had a significant problem when he was newborn and during the first couple of years of life, when he needed surgery to his feet and to his hip. And certainly when I first saw him, I wasn't at all sure that we were going to be able to achieve the mobility and the hand function that he has achieved.
Can you get your bottom up onto that one? Fantastic. Brilliant. Good effort, that.
I think some of it is very strongly due to the input from his parents. A lot of it is due to Bartholomew's own personality, which is, you know, he is an independent chap and he wants to do things. And I've just been lucky enough to be around to help guide them and help them overcome the obstacles which seemed rather difficult.
Are you going to kick it? Go on then. Fantastic. Go on.
As members of a Pentecostal church, David and Lynn believe that God is able to heal people who are sick and who have physical disabilities. But they never felt right about asking God to heal Bartholomew.
What we did was we actually committed Bartholomew to the Lord and we said, he's your child, you do with him what you'd like to do with him. And I remember in about the first months, when Bartholomew was still in hospital and we went to church, in our church we have prophecy, and there was a prophecy and it said that little by little God was going to bless Bartholomew and people were going to look and they were going to be amazed. And that's absolutely what's happened.
I just believe that God has got a plan and purpose for me, really, and that all His plans will just come to pass, and so whatever I go through, I know there's always good coming out at the other end. I pray for healing, really, all the time, but it will be at God's time, when the time is right, if He heals me.
It's end of term for the students at the Nexus Music College in Coventry, and preparations are well underway for the annual concert. It's an opportunity for the students to show off their new skills to parents and friends, and among them, Bartholomew, who is having to sort out just how he can get on and off the stage.
Now then, is there any way that you could get a leg up there with help, or do you need an intermediate step?
If there was another step, I'd be able to manage.
Okay.
But if it's a problem, don't worry.
John? I can sit here. Is there some sort of case?
The step is too high for me to get up and down on, so and I've got to come on and off the stage during the concert, so I've just got to be able to move, find a way to move up and down.
Okay, now then. I'd still like to do the gun thing. Dave, I have to do a little bit.
Yeah?
Down there. I need to put a step in. So if you can move your stool at the back, we'll see if this works. Clark's got to be able to get off the stage, you see. All right. Right. Well, let's just try it this way again then.
I'll tell you what, the best way to help me actually is probably if you hold my hands.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Well, I could do that on the way down then as well.
Right,
sure.
okay.
Let's just do that on the way down as well.
That's all right.
The care and obvious affection Bartholomew receives at the college isn't always the reaction he gets.
I think rather than dealing with the actual physical difficulties of arthrogryposis, is more really the reactions that you get from people, particularly young children. I've found all through growing up that they'll stare at me, and often they'll sort of say loud enough so that I can actually hear, "Mum, why is he walking like that?" Because I actually feel normally in myself, I don't normally think of actually having difficulties, but then it really sort of brings it back when people are sort of asking about it, and I used to find that hard to deal with, but now, really, well, as I've got older, I find it easier.
But David and Lynn also had to learn to cope with the stares and the comments of passers-by.
When you've got a child with a problem and you go out, and particularly when they start to walk and it's very obvious, and you walk along the road and people look, and they usually look at the child and they look up at you. As it gets older, they don't look at the child or the wheelchair, they look straight at you. But when they're young, they look and they look up, and you know what's going through their mind. And often that's an embarrassment. But I think at that stage, hold your head up. You know, this is the situation you're in. I believe that still, Bartholomew was our gift from God and he knew all about it. And I believe it's the time to stand firm, hold your head up and just press forward in whatever you want to do.
The concert in Coventry is well underway, and as one act finishes, it's Bartholomew's turn to go on stage.
To me, I feel normal. Although I may actually look different, I feel normal in myself, and I feel very able to do most things that anyone else would take part in. I don't sort of feel as if there's any problem with me being on a platform, and I know that God's given me the gift to play the piano, so to play at the concert I'm very happy to do, and likewise playing at church.
For some time now, Bartholomew has had problems with his feet. He's already undergone some corrective surgery, and today is making yet another visit to hospital where his consultant will assess his progress.
Well, I hope we won't be doing this too many more times.
I know.
I think we're almost putting some ruts in the road the number of times we've had to drive down to the BRI for consultancies and so on. I think I'm probably more accepting of other people now than I would have been if we hadn't had Bartholomew, because it's really opened up my eyes to someone with disability, but he's still a complete person. You recognise that because of his condition, he is, facing some difficulties throughout life, and of course, as we get older and less able to cope with him and his needs, then we're going to have to find some means of adapting for him for the future.
When he was 19, Bartholomew started having pain in his ankle joints, a condition exacerbated by the arthrogryposis. His consultant, Mr. James Livingston, is trying to assess the effectiveness of the 2 operations he performed on Bartholomew's ankles.
Just remind me, were you in plasters or were you in removable boots?
Plasters.
You've never been in a removable boot? No.
There's some concern over movement in the joints.
That feels okay.
Yeah.
That feels lovely and solid. And so essentially what we've done is we've gone into these joints and roughened them up and inserted this nail, and the idea now is that this will just fuse between the calcaneum here and the tibia here and become basically a solid block of bone. And it's an unusual operation. It's not not so much unusual, but it's, let me say, it's not one that's been described very well in terms of this sort of condition. Telectomy for arthrogryposis has been described, but it's salvage procedure when it goes wrong, and it does tend to fail eventually in time. So, you know, Bartholomew was fully aware, as I was, that we have to wait and see quite how this goes. You've clearly got abnormal joints in other parts of your feet, and I spoke with several of my colleagues before we started, and the way we started with your surgery, and we felt the best thing to do for you was to start with one joint at a time, and if you get further pain further on, then we'll go and deal with those joints in the future. So I would hope, who knows, another 20 years at least would be a good start, wouldn't it?
Yeah. I was really pleased with how things went. I was a bit worried beforehand about having movement in my foot, but he seemed really happy. Really, generally, I mean, I might have to have something inside my shoes to hold my heel and ankle into place. But I mean, that's much better than what I thought could have happened. So I was quite pleased with how things went, really.
To Bartholomew's relief, further surgery is not required, but he will still be in his wheelchair a few weeks longer.
I suppose growing up with Bartholomew has had an influence on my own attitudes to life. Maybe I'm not always conscious of that, but I think that I've grown more sensitive to other people's needs, especially those that are disadvantaged in some way, either physically or in other ways. That sense of responsibility has come possibly through having a younger brother like Bartholomew with the needs that he has. Getting older, we just get more close to each other all the time. We've always been close, but I really do notice over the last few years that you know, our relationship together is really growing.
What's all that noise?
Samuel and his wife Lorena are now parents, and Bartholomew an uncle.
End of May. It's really good to be an uncle. I was really excited when I heard that Lorena was pregnant and that they were having a baby. It seems strange to me to think that I'm an uncle, because after knowing my brother from when we were like really young, and to think that he's now married and has got a baby already, just seems amazing. I would one day like to be a father. I'd like to get married and have children at some stage. When that happens, I don't know, but I'd like that to happen one day.
But in the meantime, Bartholomew has another lifelong ambition.
The main thing I like doing is music, and I'd like to be sort of really involved in a church with music, maybe even to work on the music side at a church.
Bartholomew did get a full-time job as music director here at the fellowship he and his parents have been attending. All his musical abilities and skills developed from when he was a small child will be used here as he leads, performs and composes songs that will be sung during worship.
It's a dream come true for me, just to think that I can actually be a music director now, when I was never even supposed to be able to play the piano. It's a career that I never thought I'd been able to do.
Today, with highly advanced medical science and a general acceptance of abortion, how many Bartholomews are being prevented from coming into the world and blessing it with their talent, albeit wrapped in an awkward package?
As far as Bartholomew is concerned, he's very special to us, and always has been and still is. And when you experience this sort of difficulty, it makes you realise how much there's a little person inside. You know, certainly I said that when he was small, and it's the same today. Bartholomew is a man in his own right, and there is no way at all that I would ever recommend an abortion. And I still believe that life is from God. I believe that Bartholomew still is a gift from God to us.